Today we're going to be talking about division. The definition for partitive division is you start with some things, give an equal amount to a fixed number of groups, and count how many things end up in one or each group. Let's take the problem 2,890 divided by 34. So first we need to identify our groups and our things. So our 2,890 are our things, and let's say that they're pickles. And then, so that means our 34 are our things. That means 34 are our groups. So the question that we're trying to answer is how many pickles are going to end up in each group? So we're going to divide 2,890 equally into a fixed number of groups, which is 34. And we're going to see how many end up in one or each group. So we set up our problem like this. And so we're going to equally divide 34 among 2,890 by focusing on each different place value. So first, let's look at the thousands place. So this would be 34 times 1,000. And that would equal 34,000. And because we only have 2,890, this is way too big. And so this means we have 0 sets of 1,000. So we're going to put a 0 here to represent we have no thousands place. So next we're going to move on to the hundreds place and multiply our 34 by 100. And that is going to equal 3,400, which again is too big because we just have 2,890. So again, we're going to put a 0 here to represent that we have 0 sets of 100. So now we're going to move on to our tens place, and we're going to multiply our 34 by 10. And we're going to get 340. And that can go in to 2,890. But the next question is how many groups of 10 can you put in? So after this, it's more of a guess and check system. So let's try 34 times 8 groups of 10. So that would be 80. And you get 272. But because we're multiplying it by 80, it's really 2,720. And that fits perfectly in with our 2,890. And so we see that we have 8 sets of 10. And so we're going to put an 8 in our tens place to show that it's going in 8 times or 80 times because it's 8 sets of 10. And so we're going to subtract 2,720, but we are just going to ignore the 0 here. And we can do the same thing over here. So we have 2,890 minus 2,720. And that's about the same thing that we're doing here, except here we are ignoring the zeros because we don't need them yet. And so here we get 9 minus 2, which is 7, and 7 minus 8, which is 1. And here we get 0 minus 0 is 0, 7, and 1. So here we see a 17 and here we see a 170 because we are acknowledging the zeros in this situation. So now we're going to move on to our singles place. And now we need to bring down our 0. And so we're going to acknowledge 170 rather than just a 17. And we can bring down the 0 because as we see here, we've always had it. And so we can easily bring it down because that's when we were subtracting 272, we were really subtracting 2,720. And so the 0 was always there. We just chose to ignore it at that point in time. But now we need it for trying to see how many times 34 can go into 170. So now we need to multiply our 34 by our singles place, which is obviously 1. And so, of course, you know when we multiply something by 1, we end up with the same thing. So it's 34. And just like when we did our tens place, now it's more of a guess and check system to see how many times or how many groups of 1 we can put in. And so let's try 34 times 5. And we get 170, which is perfect because that's exactly how many we needed. And so we can see we have 5 sets of 1, or 5 sets of singles, and so we're going to put 5 in our singles place to show that's how many sets we have. And then we can subtract our 170. And perfectly we end up with 0. And so our answer is 85. We end up, that's how many pickles ended up in each group. And so if we go back to the definition, we started with some things, which was our 2,890 pickles, and we gave it to an equal amount, to a fixed number of groups, which was like 34. And we counted how many things ended up in each group, and that happened to be 85. And so we went through a place value. So we started with 1,000, and we discovered that we could put in 0 sets of 1,000. Same with 100, 0 sets of 100, because both of these numbers were too big. When we moved on to the tens place, we saw that we could put in 8 sets of 10. And so we were multiplying our 34 by 80 to get 2,720. When we put it over into our problem, we chose to just acknowledge 272 rather than 2,720. And we ended up with 17, which is really 170. And then we moved on to our singles place, dropped down our 0, and discovered that we could put in 5 sets of 1 and multiplied our 34 by 5 to end up with 170, which perfectly subtracted to get 0. And so our equal amount in our fixed group is 85. And that's how division works.